Hello, and thank you for joining us today to hear how your most connected employees can help you spread good health. I'm Sean Levana, Vice President of Marketing at ShapeUp, and I'll moderate today's call. Before I introduce today's panel, I want to note that we're here today to answer any questions you have about how social networks are changing the way we think about health and how behaviors spread from person to person. So as we go through today's presentation, please ask any questions by using the questions dialog box on your GoToWebinar control panel in the top right of your screen. We'll answer as many questions as possible following today's presentation, and we'll personally follow up on any that are not answered live. So on the call with me today is Dr. Rajiv Kumar, founder and Chief Medical Officer at ShapeUp. Dr. Kumar and I are very excited today to be joined by Dr. Larry Miller, CEO of Activate Networks, the social network analytic company founded by Harvard researcher Dr. Nicholas Christakis. Dr. Miller is a pioneer in developing novel information approaches to healthcare data. As co-founder of Activate Networks, he is responsible for driving the vision of the company. And in today's presentation, he will illuminate the famous social network research from the Framingham Heart Study. He'll also explain Activate Networks' methodology for mapping the social networks that exist within a population and identifying key individuals who carry the most influence. Finally, Dr. Miller will demonstrate how social network mapping is being used to successfully promote desired outcomes. Dr. Miller will present first today, but to provide the agenda and officially begin today's event, I'll now turn the presentation over to Dr. Rajiv Kumar.
Thank you, Sean. I'm really honored that my friend Dr. Larry Miller was able to join us for today's webinar. We're big fans of Activate Networks here at ShapeUp, and we've been very impressed with all the work being done by Dr. Miller, Dr. Christakis, and their whole team to analyze social networks and derive insights that can help us improve the health of large populations. We saw so much potential in what Activate Networks does that we decided to partner with them to help promote the idea of social network analysis for employee wellness within large employers that we work for. Today's webinar is designed to give you a high-level overview about how social network mapping can be combined with a social wellness platform to drive higher engagement and outcomes in your company's wellness programs, which I believe is a common goal that we all share. So without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Larry Miller, who will tell us about his innovative new ways to think about population health.
Thanks, Rajiv. It's a pleasure to be here with you. And again, just to continue the Love Fest very briefly, we're delighted to be working with ShapeUp. They truly understand social. And this isn't easy. And understand in a way that has some direct benefits to their clients. And we'll discuss this further as we go through the program today. So I'm going to spend just a minute or two telling you about who we are, and then I'll spend more time about telling you what we do and how that can help spread the health behaviors in the workforce. This is a company that largely came out of Harvard University and was initially founded on the technology developed by Professor Nicholas Christakis. Some of you may be aware of Professor Christakis' work. He had a popular book out a year and a half or so ago called Connected, which actually was a bestseller. And this is, by the way, it's quite good. You can get it on Amazon and everywhere else. And I'd certainly recommend it to you. We've built on the 15 years of research that Nicholas and James Fowler and others did at Harvard and elsewhere, and have developed a broad range of applications of social network analysis to various problems, especially those regarding health. I will mention briefly that we work throughout the health ecosystem. We work with health insurers, health plans, we work with provider groups, we work with hospital systems, we work with pharmaceutical companies, pharmacy benefit managers, and population management companies such as Healthways. The first point I would like to make, and it's a little more to remind all of us, we all tend to think that what we're doing is brand new. Well, in fact, thinking about health in a social context is not new. In fact, it's quite old. In sort of the modern era, perhaps going back to the last century, a number of groups have understood the implications of social approaches to health. Alcoholics Anonymous, founded in 1935, for example, was one of the first to incorporate a social dimension in their program. As you know, their programs involve groups of individuals who encourage each other and maintain each other's health. And they've, as you know, been spectacularly successful in a very difficult area. That was, of course, followed by number of other organizations with similar approaches to different health problems. For example, Narcotics Anonymous in 1953. And as you know, there are a whole range of 12-step type programs now throughout the world using social approaches. And of course, I'll mention one more, Weight Watchers, beginning in 1961, also incorporated a social approach to maintaining health in their programs, and they've been among the most successful, in fact, in addressing obesity, a very difficult problem indeed. What these organizations realized decades ago, and what we've developed scientific approaches to make systematic, are that human behaviors are contagious, almost like a virus. Behaviors spread, and they spread in human social networks. And those behaviors can be lifestyle behaviors, health behaviors such as smoking, such as alcohol use, or illnesses such as depression, sleep disorders, clinical practice patterns among physicians, fraud and criminal behaviors, and consumer purchasing decisions. There's abundant evidence that all of these behaviors spread, if you will, through social networks. And one other point I'll make very briefly, and I won't go into this in detail, virtually all the behaviors have been studied, human behaviors that have been studied, and there are well over 100 at this point, have social influence. That is, some people are more influential than others. And not only is there social influence, it occurs at 3 degrees of separation. That is, your friend's friend's friend, in Facebook terms, affects your behavior. And in fact, that can affect it very powerfully. Let me give you an example here. This is work that Nicholas Christakis and James Fowler published not quite 5 years ago. Probably this is their work that got the most attention. In fact, this network diagram is on the cover, on the front page of the New York Times when it came out. This is a social network, human social network of about 3,500 people in Framingham, Massachusetts. Christakis and Fowler were using the Framingham data to look at the spread of obesity through networks. I'll just orient you briefly. Each dot is a person, each line is a connection. It can be a friendship connection, a family connection, a work connection. The yellow dots are obese people. The size of the dots correlates with the BMI, or the size of the person. And the green dots are non-obese people. You have to squint a little bit, but I think you can see the clustering of the yellow dots. That obese people are clustering together. This was shown elsewhere in Framingham, and of course it's been shown in many other places. And what Christakis and Fowler were able to do is tease out the reasons for that clustering. And a substantial form of reason for clustering is social influence. People influence each other's body habitus, to become obese, to lose weight, etc. And in fact, I mentioned 3 degrees of separation earlier. If your friend's friend's friend, in 3 degrees of separation, who you may not know, often you don't know, becomes obese, that increases your risk of obesity by about 11%. If it's 2 degrees, your friend's friend, it's about 23%. And if it's 1 degree, it's over 30%. So these are very powerful effects. What we do at Activate Networks is we've taken and improved the Christakis and Fowler technology, and we can map virtually any population. We can map physicians, we do a lot of that. We map patients, we map residents of any community in the US at this point. We map members of organizations, and we map employees, usually at large corporations, ranging from several hundred employees to 50,000 and more employees. I'm not going to go into the methodology in detail here. In general, the data we use to map employees at corporations or other large organizations is either surveys, online surveys, or email traffic. That is, what communications traffic that's gone back and forth. And I will say in the email traffic, we don't look at the content of emails. We simply look at the traffic, and we've developed ways to interpret that traffic to construct networks. Let me switch gears now and just talk for a moment about workforces. I think this is something that I'm sure all of you know. That the vast majority of North American companies offer some sort of wellness program. The problem, of course, is engagement. How can we get more employees to participate? Again, this is something that ShapeUp is quite good at, and they'll discuss that a bit later. And that appears to be true regardless of the type of health behavior involved in the wellness program, whether it's increasing physical activity, weight management or nutrition, smoking cessation, etc. Getting employees to participate is a huge issue. What we bring to the table at Activate, and what network science in general brings to the table, is a way to increase participation and generally do it with less effort. Sounds too good to be true, but in fact it's not. It's the beauty of networks and the beauty of what we call the multiplier effect. Behavior in networks moves often very rapidly. We all know how gossip spreads through networks like wildfire. Health behavior spread very rapidly as well. If influential people in the network adopt a behavior or begin to participate in a wellness program, others will adopt the same behavior. This is what we call the multiplier effect. If you can get certain individuals to participate, that will be multiplied by the network. The key, of course, is we all have limited resources. We're trying to get more done with less. And letting the networks spread the behavior or spread the message is a very powerful way to get greater bang for your buck. I'm going to show you spend just a moment on networks. This is your entire network tutorial. Those of you who've read Connected have seen this figure. It's in Connected. This is a human social network. This happens to be 101 college students. All human social networks look more or less the same. They look like this. Each dot is a person. Each line in this case is a friendship connection. I want to make 2 quick points to help illustrate why networks are so important. If you look at C in the center and D out to the right, they each have 6 connections, 6 friends, but they're different. You can see C being right at the center is in a different position. And in fact, if there's information coming through the network or information going from C, it will go out more effectively, or C will be buffeted by it, compared to D, who's not on the periphery. The key point to remember here is that network position is important, and you can use that to help target programs with individuals. Look briefly at A and B over on the left. They each have 4 connections, 4 friends, but again, they're different. A's friends are all connected to each other. B's friends are not. So if you're trying to get people involved in a cooperative behavior, let's say participating in a wellness program, A is somebody to think about. His or her friends are likely to participate as well. B, it's a little more trouble. There's going to be more effort in getting his or her friends together. Now, how do we measure influence? I mentioned earlier that in human networks, some people are more influential than others. Not a great surprise. We can identify these individuals with high degrees of precision. And the concepts are pretty simple. The statistics are very complicated. We won't go into those. Part of it, of course, is just number of connections. If I'm connected to 8 people and you're connected to 2, well, I'm probably going to be more influential. But it's not just number of first-degree connections. I've mentioned earlier that influence in virtually every human behavior that's been studied goes out to 3 degrees of separation. So what really matters is not just the number of first-degree connections, but the size of my whole network neighborhood. I may only have a few first-degree connections, but they may have lots of connections, and my network neighborhood will be large. So we will look at both number of connections and size of network neighborhood. We'll look at centrality, which I just mentioned a minute ago. If you're central in the network, or central in a cluster, you're likely to be more influential. And we'll look at other factors that we may know about me, what kind of person I am, etc., and factor those into looking at influence. At the end of the day, we can identify influential individuals in small networks or very large networks. So now let me bring this down to earth for a moment. So how do we boost engagement and sustainability? And I guess since I mentioned sustainability, I better point that out as well. The second major problem in employee wellness programs after employer engagement or participation is sustainability. You can get people in, but can you keep them there at 6 months, at a year, even beyond? And again, one of the great advantages of social and network in particular approaches is that social influence increases sustainability dramatically. Again, Alcoholics Anonymous and Weight Watchers figured this out decades ago. We can do the same thing, but we can do it in a more systematic way. So how do you do it? Well, the process is pretty simple. First, we'll map the networks of employees or members of a large organization. And again, I've mentioned this, we'll map employees based on surveys or communications traffic, usually email traffic. We'll then use the methodologies I described a moment ago to look at the most influential people. We'll look at their influencees, and we'll look at patterns, because influence is not a simple phenomenon in the networks. We'll then overlay health information, pre-existing information about health behaviors, participation in past programs, etc. And then we'll work with our partners at ShapeUp to segment the workforce based on influence and based on the network structure. Of course, all human networks aren't exactly the same, and one has to think about the structure as well. And then finally, with ShapeUp, we'll implement these programs with a highly focused outreach. Let's get the influential folks involved as champions, as captains, as ShapeUp describes, and they will bring others in the network with them. It's a classic example and a very good example of the multiplier effect. I'm just going to illustrate a few networks from real companies for a moment. This happens to be you can tell from the title, this happens to be a petrochemical company. I'm showing just a small part of the network. This is the organization chart. We've all seen a few of these. Now, what most of you haven't seen is what we would describe. Rajiv, I'm going to have to ask you to do the build here. Thank you. This is how work really gets done. This is what the social network at this company looks like. In this case, this was derived from surveys. You can see right in the center is an employee named Mitchell. We've changed the names, of course. And he had been buried down in the exploration, third from the bottom. You would not have any particular reason from the org chart to realize that Mitchell is a highly influential employee. But if you look at the social network, you'll find that almost nothing happens in this company that doesn't go through Mitchell. Network again, and this time this was done using communications traffic, email traffic in particular. Again, each dot is an individual, each line is a kind of communications connection in this case. I'll point out a couple things. You can, all human networks look like this. They'll have clusters in some areas and then be sparse in others. And one has to take that into account when looking at influence patterns. Right in the center, we have people we often call Kevin Bacons, from the 6 degrees of separation. That is, individuals who are central to the network and have a short path to everyone else. They're likely to be highly influential, as opposed to the Steve McQueens, who you can see are out on the periphery, and are going to be much less influential, except perhaps on individuals very close to them. This is an obesity project. You can see their BMI is mapped here, but we'll go to the next one and I'll give a little bit more detail on that. This is a corporation with multiple locations. You can see them over on the side. All these all happen to be in the U.S. We work with both U.S. companies and multinational companies. And here, again, part of a project to try to help a wellness program to help with obesity. What we're showing here is the size of the individual nodes. Each node is a person. The size of each of these dots reflects their BMI. So what's striking and not uncommon is that you see clusters. There are clusters of individuals with high BMIs and large clusters of individuals with normal BMIs. So as one does this network and influence analysis, you have to be careful. If you just ask me to give me the 20 most influential people in this company, we could do that based on the network. But they wouldn't necessarily represent each cluster, because of course if you're trying to implement a program, you need to involve the smaller clusters as well as the bigger clusters. So influence measurement requires some sophistication in understanding network structure. Here's the same company. Again, this is an obesity program, and here's participation a year out. Again, the larger nodes are participants, the smaller nodes are not. This company's got very good participation, in fact. And you can see, the point I want to make here primarily is that participation clusters, as we would expect. This is a network phenomenon. You'll see clusters of participants and clusters of non-participants. And in fact, that's exactly what we see time and again. And it makes sense intuitively. I'll use myself as a sort of very simplistic example. I go to the gym every morning at 6 with 3 or 4 other people, and we're happy to see each other. Well, sometimes happy to see each other, but there are mornings I just don't feel like it. But then I think, if I don't go, what will they think? So I get up and go, and that's exactly what happens, and it happens week in, week out, month in, month out, year in, year out. Social forces are extraordinarily powerful, both in increasing participation and in maintaining participation. So before I ask Rajiv to really talk about how you do this in the real world, let me leave you with 2 major points. Using social networks, corporations and other large organizations can demonstrably improve wellness programs in 2 ways. First, increasing engagement and participation by working through influential individuals. ShapeUp will call them champions or captains. You can increase participation. Influencers will bring their influencees with them, and this happens time and time again in every organization, in every network structure. And using a network approach will increase sustainability. Once you get people involved with their influencers and influencees, with their groupings, if you will, with their tribes, some would say, they're much more likely to continue the program than they would be if they were on their own. Thanks for the chance to speak with you today. I'll hand this over to Rajiv and look forward to your questions later.
Thanks, Dr. Miller. I think that was really an excellent overview of how this social network analytics approach to identifying the influencers within a population works. And I've read Connected, I've reviewed all of the research multiple times, and I've seen you present. And I have to say that each time I hear this information, it makes even more sense to me and seems even more important. So the reason why all of us should be so excited, those of us who are in the health promotion space, is that if we can identify and target the influencers, we stand a greater chance of achieving our goals, which I believe is improving population health. So what I want to do now is talk to you in more detail about how Activate Network's social network mapping process can be combined with a social network-based wellness program or intervention in order to take the data and turn it into actionable steps. So first, allow me to briefly give you an overview of ShapeUp. This is a company founded by myself and my colleague, Dr. Brad Weinberg, right around the time that Dr. Christakis was first publishing his now famous studies on how peers influence our health. And what Dr. Weinberg and I saw among our patients was that the few who were able to successfully change their behavior, ultimately losing weight or improving their cholesterol or going off their diabetes medications, were those patients who had worked together with their friends, their family, and their colleagues. In other words, their social network, their trusted network, to get the motivation, support, and accountability they needed to succeed. And that insight led us to start a public health campaign here in Rhode Island, where we're based, called ShapeUp Rhode Island, and that became the genesis of our company, which is called ShapeUp. And like Activate Networks, we take our research very seriously here at ShapeUp. Researchers at Brown Medical School, including Dr. Rena Wing, who's pictured here on the right, Dr. Weinberg and myself have published a number of studies in peer-reviewed journals and presented at numerous conferences on the clinically significant weight loss and other health outcomes, as well as the sustainability of those outcomes that our social model to behavior change can produce. I'm excited, we just got word last week that a new paper that we wrote with Dr. Rena Wing that shows that weight loss is contagious within a social wellness program like ours just got accepted for publication in a peer-reviewed journal. So when that's available, we'll be happy and we'll look forward to sharing that with all of you. We really believe it's the first study to show that not that weight gain is contagious, but that weight loss is contagious within a social-based corporate wellness program. And we've been fortunate over the years to have the chance to take this model and to produce results for some of the country's largest and most innovative companies. So let's build off of what Dr. Miller shared with us. Imagine that you just conducted a social network analysis and mapping process for your population with Activate Networks. And so you looked at your network and suddenly you've now identified who are your most and least connected employees. Who are the Kevin Bacons and the Steve McQueens that Dr. Miller described? And the question then is, what do I do with these people? How can I leverage their position in the social network to help achieve my company's health and wellness goals? Well, the first step is to think about the personality types of the Kevin Bacons. And this is some of the vernacular from Malcolm Gladwell's well-known book, The Tipping Point. And here we describe 3 types of highly influential, highly connected people. First, you have the connectors. These are the people with wide social circles. They're the hubs of the human social network. They know a ton of people, and they have a huge social graph. And by connecting with a connector, you suddenly find yourself connected to a significant number of new people. And these are the people that are the key to the virality of any message. Then you have the mavens. The mavens are knowledgeable people. They seek out incredible amounts of information, and they like to share that information. And they also hold others accountable for sharing accurate information. So in a sense, these mavens police a social network and make sure that the information that's being shared is correct. And people are drawn to the mavens because they view them as experts and they want to learn from their accumulated knowledge. And then finally, the third group is you have the salespeople. These are the charismatic individuals with powerful negotiation skills. And they exert a soft influence rather than forceful power. And their source of influence comes from the fact that other people have a tendency to imitate them or emulate them and to follow what they do. These are the inherently social people that are naturally found in central locations within any social network. Excuse me. The connectors want to connect more people, the mavens want to share their knowledge, and the salespeople like to persuade others to follow them. These are the people who can be powerful drivers of spreading good health at your company if you know how to leverage them. So how do you leverage your connected individuals? Well, there are 4 key ways to engage and leverage these connected individuals to spread healthy behaviors throughout your population. The first step is you want to invite them to take a leadership role. Put them not only in a position of centrality, but also in a position of relative power. Once they accept the leadership role, you want to empower them. Don't make them do a lot of work, but rather give them easy access to tools to help engage their colleagues. Remember, this comes naturally to them, so it's not very hard to do. You also want to hold these people accountable, or you want to hold these people up as success stories if and when they do something extraordinary from a health perspective, so that you can leverage their influence and encourage others to imitate them. And finally, you want to give them social recognition and make them feel valued so that they'll want to help you achieve your goals. So let's dive into some very specific examples. In the Shape Up program, or really in any workplace-based team competition or challenge, there's the concept of a team captain. And this is the individual who takes the first step to join a competition, form a team, invite his or her colleagues to join that team, and then tries to keep them organized and motivated and on track to win. The position of team captain is really a natural fit for many of your most connected employees. They know a lot of people, they're influential, and they like information sharing. Traditionally, programs like ours send messages out to the entire company asking for team captains to self-identify. This process works great, but imagine how much better and cheaper and faster it would work if we could directly reach out to a targeted group of people already identified by our social network map as those who would be ideal candidates. That's the best way to find the highest number and the best team captains. When reaching out to your most influential employees, it's important to tailor the message to them. So rather than sending out generic informational messages, make your marketing specific to their personality type and their position within the social network. So do things like appeal to their natural social instincts, and they'll be more likely to respond. Messaging that uses words like leader or team or recruit tend to appeal to these individuals. There's a belief in the wellness industry that leadership support is crucial to the success of a program, and that's absolutely true. But some organizations get too hung up on top-down flow of communication and promotion, and they forget about the importance of a grassroots, bottom-up approach. We all know that we're more likely to open and read and respond to a message from a friend or a colleague than we are to one that came from somebody in corporate whom we've never met before. And this is where mapping your social network becomes important. Remember that your most influential employees, especially the mavens, love to share information. Once you've identified them, you can ask them to spread health and wellness messages to their colleagues. Whether it's related to a program or it's educational information or really anything else, directly asking your influential employees to spread the word will increase the reach of your communications. Here's an interesting data point. The average team captain in the Shape Up program sends invitations to 7 additional colleagues, letting them know about the program. And that's really powerful virality, but you have to have a structure in place to promote it, and you have to directly ask them to do this spreading of the word for you. More than just being content sharers, your influential employees can be your best content creators. So you want to leverage them to crowdsource content and events for your wellness program. Here's one example of how a user can create a peer-to-peer healthy challenge on the Shape Up platform. The challenge creator can choose whom to invite to a particular challenge. They can pick an activity, or they can enter in a custom activity that's relevant to them or maybe localized to their work site. And they can select a date. And then they can issue that challenge for others to join. Once you've identified your most influential employees, you can promote tools like this challenge creator in order to help them spread healthy opportunities and behaviors throughout your population. Another example of how these employees can create social content for your program is through conversations. On the Shape Up platform, individuals can start or join conversations about many different health topics. Invite your connected employees to start conversations and begin using these types of tools. They'll create interesting, relevant, localized content, and others will gravitate toward it. People in your company's social network look up to the most influential individuals, and they often try to emulate them. And that's why it makes perfect sense to choose these people as the ones whose health-related efforts and success stories you profile and promote to your population. Hold these employees up as success stories, and the impact of those stories will be greater. No one likes to get exclusive information more than your company's mavens. This puts them in a position of being an expert, and it gives them a reason to share and show their exclusive information and knowledge. So consider releasing information about events and programs and incentives to these individuals earlier than you do to everyone else. They'll then share it and help create some buzz before you announce it company-wide. The employees at the center of your social network are the best people to gather feedback from. Due to their high level of connectedness, they're often the ones hearing what other colleagues are saying. In other words, they have their finger on the pulse of your organization. So make sure you learn from these individuals. Ask them to share with you what they're hearing from their coworkers. What are they looking for out of your wellness program? How are your employees reacting to your current offerings? Sometimes the Steve McQueens won't tell you what's going on, but the Kevin Bacons will. And finally, in order to truly leverage these individuals and keep them engaged with you over a long period of time, it's important to give them a special status. And titles like Wellness Champions or Wellness Leaders, recognition in the form of certificates or badges or even T-shirts or perhaps lunch with the CEO or another important individual within your company makes these individuals feel valuable. It gives them something that they can share and brag about socially with regard to their earned status. and it motivates them to keep helping you spread good health at your company. So our key takeaway from ShapeUp for today's webinar is that if you map and analyze your employee network and you've identified your most influential employees, there are simple and effective social strategies that you can employ to empower them to spread good health within your company. And this approach saves you time and money when it comes to marketing and communications, and it will also increase the impact that you personally are able to have on the health of your population. ShapeUp and Activate Networks have teamed up to help large employers and health plans map the networks within their populations and then leverage a social networking-based wellness intervention to spread good health. If you're interested in learning more about this approach, we welcome you to contact us. So we'd be thrilled to talk about how this might work within your population. So let's now begin the question and answer period. I'll turn the webinar back to Sean Lavana, Vice President of Marketing at ShapeUp, and he'll be the moderator for any questions that you may have for either Dr. Miller or myself, or both.
Thanks, Rajiv, and thanks, Dr. Miller, for your time today. We do have some questions coming in. Let me hit on one first, and that's about the copy of today's presentation. We will absolutely make that available to anybody who requests it, and we'll send out a link to all attendees today. That'll go out tomorrow morning so that you can easily access the slides and a recorded version of today's webinar. Next question, and I'll throw this out to both of you. Dr. Miller, you may want to answer first. By doing a network analysis alone, how do you identify the specific personality of the Kevin Bacon type? So I think that ties into both of your questions, both of your presentations there about, for example, the mavens in your network. How do you identify their personalities?
And this is Larry Miller. I want to be clear. We're looking at the social axis when we map networks. We're not gaining information about individual characteristics. So we're looking for people who are connected to the network, who have large network neighborhoods, for example, as opposed to those who are minimally connected in the network. There may be additional information about their own characters or characterological issues that make them more likely than to be a maven and so forth. So there are two sides, maybe another way to put it, there are two sides of the coin, the social and the individual, and we focus on the social.
I'll add to that. So, I think there are very simple ways through survey tools that you can do personality analysis on your population. But I think the key point is while there are mavens and connectors, a lot of these traits overlap. And so I wouldn't say that anybody falls in one particular bucket. The point here is that these are the types of characteristics exhibited by the most connected, most influential employees. And it's important to keep those characteristics in mind when creating program communications, program offerings, and the entire structure of your wellness program, because you want to speak to those traits and you want to play to what's going to drive and motivate these individuals to help you spread your healthy behavior. So you may never know exactly who's a maven or who's a connector, but what you will do is you'll be able to create messages that speak to those individuals, and therefore those individuals will self-volunteer, respond to your message, and take the action that you're looking for them to take.
Okay, thanks to you both. There's a couple of questions coming in along a similar vein. So Dr. Miller, I'll propose this to you and see if I can aggregate some into one here. Can you provide some more details on how you use surveys and email traffic to map a social network? For example, how many emails would a connector send out daily?
It's an interesting question. We'll start with email. And it varies tremendously based on the organization. Organizations that have lots of email volume, obviously you approach differently. And generally, the more connected people do send out more emails. There's no question about that. But it's more, the analysis is more sophisticated than that. It's also, do people respond to those emails? How quickly do they respond? How many others email them? So we call it a taxonomy of what different email behaviors mean. And we've managed to work that out in some detail. But we've just submitted our first academic publication in this area. So I can't give you a specific number except to say that that's certainly one of the factors. We do surveys. The questions are fairly straightforward. It's many of what you'd expect. Who do you spend time with at work? Who do you go to for expertise? Who do you work with most frequently? So those give us a very clear idea of who's connected in a network.
Okay, thank you. And a follow-up to that, Dr. Miller, is there a way to measure what types of communications are most effective in terms of speed and depth of penetration into a network?
Yeah, it's a very good question, and one that's of great interest to us and to our clients. And the answer is yes. It's always just to qualify it. These are statistical methodologies, and they're not perfect. One key factor, of course, is the structure of the network. I won't show you lots of network diagrams, but you can imagine some of them are very tight with lots of tight connections, and some are fairly sparse, where some have multiple clusters and some have one large cluster. And the way how you transmit a message and how quickly it will pass through the network is in large part dependent on different structures. Now, obviously, if the message is compelling, that helps too. If the message that people believe is important, and then that will, of course, increase its speed and reach. But understanding network structure and knowing where to seed the message, if you will, turns out to be very important.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Miller. One more question for you. Do you have any concerns when you're doing these analyses about HIPAA, especially in healthcare settings?
No, we don't. Again, we've had some experience here. And then, by the way, because we deal with healthcare data all the time, we're more than HIPAA compliant. We're what's called FISMA compliant here, which is the next level up. Again, obviously this information needs to stay within the organization, within the corporation, and it shouldn't go outside. But as long as there's care taken in that regard, this is certainly compliant with regulations.
Okay, thank you. And another question, is there such a thing as a negative influencer whom you wouldn't want to activate or enhance their influence and increase connections?
Yes, there is, and again, it's a good question. And then what I didn't emphasize is that networks, as Nicholas Christakis likes to say, networks magnify. They magnify behavior, and it can be both good and bad behavior. And there are plenty of instances where the behaviors aren't what you'd want. So yes, there can be individuals who are influential, who you probably not want to engage. And it's one of the reasons, of course, that we will overlay health information on health and health behaviors on the network to make sure that as we look at influential people, we're looking at people whose influence will likely go in the right direction.
Okay, next question I'll throw out to both of you. Dr. Miller, if you again want to respond first. How do you affect a corporate culture which has yet to embrace social networks and often views social networking as a threat to productivity and controlling a message?
Yeah, and again, here what I'd like to do is distinguish between the way most people think about social networks and the way social networks occur in organizations. If I say social network, almost everybody thinks about Facebook or Twitter or one of the other online networks. And that's not a great surprise. We call that social media, of course. But those aren't the sort of networks that we're talking about. We're talking about the real networks that occur in every human grouping or organization that occur based on face-to-face interactions. And whether anyone likes it or not, this is one of the things that makes us human. We form networks or tribes. So in every organization, these exist. One of the key part of our message is these informal networks are there. Let's understand them and let's use them for positive effects. Let's help use networks to change health behavior, to improve health behavior, for example. So put the Facebooks and the Twitters and the social media aside. We do work in that area, but that's a separate part of our business.
And Sean, I'll offer our perspective at ShapeUp. We do have a software platform that we're licensing to corporations to make available to their employees, and there are social tools. I showed some of them: conversations, peer-to-peer challenges, people creating profiles and uploading a photo, and having sharing information with their team. Those are all social activities, and many people can confuse that with a Facebook or like platform. And certainly this is one of the most common questions or rather objections that we get when we talk to companies. But what I'll share with you is that we have some of the most risk-averse companies in the nation who are whitelisting this platform even while they blacklist Facebook and Twitter at their employee populations, because what they're realizing is that this type of platform, if it's designed in the form of an intervention, it's not designed in the form of just a pure social platform where people are posting photos and chatting and designed to suck up all their time. It's designed as an intervention that is going to promote offline activity, right? We want to get people, we want to identify them, we want to get them engaged, we want to push them offline and get them doing physical activity and getting their biometric screening done and eating healthy and doing things offline in the real world that are going to impact their health. Spending a lot of time on a website is not going to. And so what we do is we design the platform very specifically so that it's not overly engaging. It doesn't keep people addicted, but it does keep them engaged over a sustained period of time. What we're finding is that the average user doesn't spend more than 15 minutes on the website at a time, and that they're not logging in on average more than once per week. So we're achieving our goal of keeping people engaged over time, changing their behavior in a measurable way, and not reducing their productivity. And in fact, we're increasing their productivity. So I think it's a natural instinct. But once people become familiar and they try this out and they realize that there are companies all across the world that are embracing this because it's making their employees more productive, not less productive.
Thank you both. One more question, Dr. Miller. How long does a typical network mapping take, say, for example, in a company that has about 5,000 employees?
For a company that size, which again, is kind of medium size in our standards, it depends a little on whether around 8 weeks. And that includes, that's assuming you collect information in surveys, because the survey will take about 3 weeks to send 3 waves around. If you use email traffic, it's a little bit less. These don't take months. These efforts can easily be completed in weeks.
Okay, thank you. I think that's going to do it for questions today. Rajiv, Dr. Miller, would you like to add closing comments?
Rajiv, I want to thank you for making this possible. I've certainly enjoyed the questions, and we'd be delighted to work with any of you folks who've attended the webinar, and of course we're delighted to work with ShapeUp.
Great, thank you so much, Dr. Miller. It's really an honor and a privilege to have you on today's webinar. The response was really incredible, and I think that speaks to just how important the work that you're doing and Dr. Christakis has done in the past is to all of us in this industry. And there's just a great hunger for people to understand this better and to figure out how to make it into something that's actionable that can demonstrably improve the health of their population. So thanks for helping to illuminate that for us. We're excited to be working with Activate Networks, and for anyone out there who wants to look at how this combined approach can work, how you can not only map and identify the influencers within your social network, but also leverage them in very specific, concrete ways and turnkey ways to spread good health, we'd be happy to continue the conversation and to explore your population and see how this might work. So please be in touch. We'll look forward to inviting you to future webinars, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.